Creepy facts about each state.
Wyoming, the Platte River, Ship of Death. Why it's creepy. There are endless creepy tales in the wilds of Wyoming, among them a headless woman who haunts the lodge at Old Faithful. But the creepiest is also the most overlooked. A ghost ship that materialized out of fog on the Platte River. The cursed crew huddles on the deck of the old sailboat surrounding a body. If the onlooker persists in looking, the corpse is revealed to be that of a still living loved one who will then die soon afterward. Where it came from. The ship was first reportedly spotted in 1892 by a trapper named Leon Weber, whose girlfriend died shortly after he envisioned her on the cursed deck. Legend has it that the last documented sighting claimed the life of a lumberjack's friend back in 1903. There have been no official sightings since, though you could forgive people for getting the heck out of the way from the river as soon as the fog rolls in. Wisconsin, the Rhinelander Hodag. Why it's creepy. The Hodag is a small creature that is simultaneously a frightening demon and comically covered in spikes. It's often portrayed as being dog-sized, but early reporters said it could grow to 6 feet long. A 1928 legend describes the Hodag as having the head of a frog, saber-toothed tiger-like fangs, thick legs with large claws, the back of a plated dinosaur, and a long tail with spears on the end. Despite its hellspawn swagger, it was never that much of a threat to humans, outside of its powerful skunk perfume stench. Where it came from. The Green Devil was discovered in 1893 by developer Eugene Shepard and almost instantly became a fixture of North Wisconsin folklore. 3 years later, Shepard claimed he caught another and put it on display at the 1896 Oneida County Fair. He had knocked it out with chloroform, so of course it was sleeping. But he had wires hooked up to the fake animal to make it move occasionally. Word spread fast, and the Smithsonian sent a reporter to look into the Hodag. Shepard quickly admitted it was a fraud. Rhinelander never let go, though. It's the high school mascot, and there are multiple statues of the beast around town. West Virginia, Mothman. Why it's creepy. The Mothman was introduced to West Virginia in 1966 with the best newspaper headline ever. Couples see man-sized bird. Creature something. From there, residents all over West Virginia reported seeing the winged, human-like, red-eyed creature around the state. Unsure if it was a demon, alien, or genetic experiment gone wrong, even as recently as 2016, Mothman sightings have made the news. Yes, like the actual news. Where it came from. The myth dates back to that initial newspaper piece, but the legend has been long propagated in pop culture, inspiring a horror novel and the subsequent Richard Gere film adaptation in Point Pleasant, where the original incident was recorded. There's a Mothman museum, a Mothman festival, and a sizable statue. The Mothman has become big business, and if nothing else, he clearly paved the way for a tabloid darling, the Bat Child. Washington, the 13 Steps to Hell. Why it's creepy. Basically the opposite of the Zeppelin song, The Multi Cemetery. Itself the subject of rumors associating it with Satanism is rumored to include a subterranean tomb for a really creepy rich family that could be accessed by 13 steps that lead to their final resting place. Or the final resting place of every damned soul in history. As legend has it that descending the entire staircase led you to the glimpse of hell itself. Where it came from. The cemetery's been around since 1901, though the crypt itself date has been lost to time, as have the stairs themselves, which have been bulldozed and covered in concrete. That hasn't stopped curious paranormal masochists from trespassing on the secluded private property, allegedly showing up at the cemetery at night, eager to unearth it via nocturnal excavation missions, and being greeted by the cemetery's other apparitions. Virginia, the Bunny Man Bridge. Why it's creepy. The legend is fun to repeat at campfires, but the real sightings beyond the legend are some to give you nightmares. In 1970, there were numerous police reports of people who had been threatened by a man holding an axe wearing a white suit with bunny ears. Yes, bunny ears. A few individuals reported that the man in the suit occasionally threw an axe at them for trespassing. To this day, there have been many sightings of dead rabbits appearing in the woods surrounding Fairfax Bridge, now known as the Bunny Man Bridge, as well as a white figure appearing late at night underneath the bridge. Where it came from. Legend says that in 1904, a group of convicts were piled onto a bus to be transported from an asylum in Clifton, Virginia, to a nearby prison. En route, one of the buses crashed. The convicts managed to escape, and the police were able to round up all but one of the convicts. As their search went on, they began to find skinned, half-eaten bunnies in the woods and hanging from the overpass of Fairfax Bridge, now known as the Bunny Man Bridge. A year later, on Halloween night, several teens went to hang out under the bridge. Come morning, they were all found dead. It is said that if you hang out under the bridge on Halloween night, you will meet the same fate as the rabbits and the teenagers. Colorado, Riverdale Road. Why it's creepy. For 11 horrifying miles, Riverdale Road near Thornton, Colorado is crammed with enough horrifying legends to bring even the bravest paranormal investigators to his knees. From a ghostly runner attacking parked cars on Joggers Hill, to various demons and even a phantom Camaro revving up and flying down the winding road. But the gates of hell seems the epic center. The physical iron gates are now gone, but what remains is the partial shell of an old mansion where a madman supposedly burned his wife and children alive. Left behind are the barren, charred plot of land and a white-clad woman who wanders the area. She's joined by the ghost of slaves supposedly hanged from the now charred tree. Go ahead and run away when you see something creepy like a ethereal pack of dogs. You're probably just going to bump into something worse, probably hell, a portal to which some believe is here. That maybe explains why so many demons were conjured in a weird underground chicken coop near a set of underground tunnels. Where it came from. It's unknown when things got bad, though given the spirits of ghost slaves, it's safe to assume terrible things have been happening on Riverdale Road since the 1850s. And each time something terrible happened over the decades, it just got kind of stacked onto this nesting doll of a horror show. Connecticut, Dudleytown. Why it's creepy. Often cited as a dark vortex, rumor has it that any visitor that steals an artifact from Dudleytown will have a curse put on them and their family. Dudleytown Forest visitors report seeing just about every kind of paranormal phenomenon you could think of. People describe an unnerving lack of wildlife in the area, as well as floating orbs of light and sinister wolf-like black shadows, murmurs and disembodied voices, as well as a feeling of general dread. Add on the fact that there's a mysterious group called the Dark Forest Association that polices the ground with military force, and you've got yourself a serious case of that what the Hades is really going on here. Where it came from. The curse of the ill-fated Dudleys began back in jolly old England, where Edmund Dudley was beheaded for conspiring against King Henry VII. This treacherous act apparently unleashed a curse on the rest of the Dudley clan, which immigrated from Guilford, England to Cornwall, Connecticut in 1748. They helped establish a community center around the town's then thriving iron industry before a series of untimely disasters befell the family. These calamities include a series of mysterious deaths, which in turn inspired madness and suicide among the Dudleys, several of whom disappeared in the woods never to be seen again. The remaining residents very sensibly ditched the town, which has been abandoned ever since. Arkansas, the Dog Boy. Why it's creepy. The name sounds kinda goofy, or actually even kind of like goofy, but if you find yourself at 65 Mulberry Street in the middle of Arkansas in a little town called Quitman, you won't laugh if you see the hulking outline of a 300-pound half-man, half-beast, complete with glowing animal eyes glaring out of the windows. Walk quickly, as he has been known to chase people down his street biting at their heels. Kinda like a dog, actually. Where it came from. This is actually the rare urban legend where the story behind the story ends up being even creepier than the folklore. Gerald Bettis, the only son of the Bettis family of 65 Mulberry, was always a problem child. But not in the cute Junior Healy way. Bettis would collect and torture animals before turning his psychopathic focus to his elderly parents, allegedly imprisoning them in their own home and potentially even murdering his own father. Eventually, Bettis would be imprisoned for growing marijuana on his back porch and would die in a state penitentiary in 1988 of a drug overdose. California, the many horrors of Turnbull Canyon. Why it's creepy. Located near LA between Whittier and the City of Industry, Turnbull is a 49,000-acre Hades of a nightmare field set towards the scenic hills. You want your scares rooted in American history. The natives called it Hukatokana, or the place of the devil, where the ghosts of those slain for not converting to Christianity dwell alongside witches and Satanists, who reportedly used the place to sacrifice children, whose spirits now walk the canyon and dangle from trees. They're joined by the ghost of 21 kids who perished in a plane crash back in '52, allegedly, as there's no existing record of it. Then there's the remains of the old insane asylum that came back to life to kill a teen in the '60s via a long doormat electrical wire. There are cults, alien encounters, gravity heals, it goes on and on. Basically, if it's something that goes under your skin, there's a story about it happening in this seemingly cursed canyon. Where it came from. The place's evil vibes date back centuries, though it wasn't until the site was established as a fur trapping site in 1845 that things started getting really intense. With word of the site's terrors traveling far and wide and making it a place to visit as much for its beauty as morbid curiosity. Arizona Skinwalkers. Why it's creepy. It's easy to feel uneasy while driving through the desert roads of Arizona, especially at night, and particularly so when you hear a short burst of taps on your window while cruising at 60 miles per hour and turn to see the shape-shifting, mutilated, half-human creature responsible for the high-speed interruption. Breathe. It only wants to rip the flesh off your bones. This legend is so ingrained in Arizona culture that when a Navajo woman was found brutally murdered in Flagstaff, the accused killer's defense in court was that the attack could have only been perpetrated by a skinwalker. There's even a defined and well-documented portion of the state known as Skinwalker Ranch, where you are most likely to see one of the creatures. Not that you'd actually want to go though, right? Where it came from. The Skinwalkers, like so many ancient American urban legends, have roots in Native American folklore. While it's fairly hard to gather specific details as speaking of potentially sinister legends is seriously taboo in Navajo culture. It is understood that what non-Navajos refer to as skinwalkers are witch doctors who have become an evil reflection of everything the Navajo Nation values. Basically, they are men who transformed into malevolent, murderous creatures that have no problems using their spiritual powers to kill. Navajo medicine men are trained to learn both good and evil aspects of their power, and skinwalkers are those who have turned to the dark side. It's all very Star Wars and frankly, still terrifying. Maryland, the Goat Man. Why it's creepy. Maryland's infamous Goat Man allegedly does all the things you would expect a deranged half-goat, half-man to do. Kill teenagers, eat hot dogs, scream like a goat, etc. But the most terrifying aspect is just how deep the lore goes. The USDA was even forced at one point to publicly deny accidentally creating the beast in their Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. Another tale revolves around a goat farmer who, after realizing a group of rowdy teens had killed his tribe, went totally crazy and turned into a teen-slaying goat monster. Where it came from. Though the lore had been around for a while, the first recorded media mentions of the Goat Man occurred in 1971, courtesy of writer Karen Hostler of the Prince George's County News. The first was a deep dive into Maryland folklore, followed by an actual news item about a family blaming the brutal decapitation of their puppy on the Goat Man, which they may or may not have just heard about via the county news. 1 month later, the Washington Post ran a national feature detailing the legend of the Goat Man. Ultimately, the Goat Man has become one of America's most persistent and well-known urban legends, with claimed sightings still occurring with regularity and cheesy fictionalizations still creeping out the old line state. Maine, Wood Island Wild. Why it's creepy. Instead of providing useful light to help ships navigate, the lighthouse on Wood Island reportedly provides a space for strange moans, unexplained shadows, and other indicators of paranormal activity, commonly attributed to a murder suicide that took place there decades ago. Where it came from. Howard Hobbs, a local fisherman and drifter, really did murder his landlord, Fred Milliken, on the Wood Island in 1896. Hobbs had been drinking, and after shooting Milliken, left the scene and turned his rifle on himself. You can read about the events of that day in all their 19th century newspaper glory. From ghost experts who weigh in on such things, Hobbs is generally considered the likeliest candidate to still be haunting the lighthouse. Louisiana, the vampire Comte de Saint-Germain. Why it's creepy. As far as spooky crap goes, Louisiana does not rely solely on voodoo, hoodoo, or whatever do, ghost, and Woody Harrelson's accent from True Detective. Like any debonair bloodsucker male vampire worth his garlic, Shock St. Germain's hobby is seducing attractive young females in New Orleans only to promptly drink their blood. By some accounts, he was born in the early 1700s. In others, he has been alive since Christ. After dying in 1783, he was spotted all over Europe before reappearing to terrorize New Orleans in 1902. He's still on his blood-drinking binge in the French Quarter today, though now he just goes by Jack. Where it came from. Comte de Saint-Germain was certainly a real person, alchemist and all-around high society snob, who befriended a laundry list of famous 18th century luminaries. He ran with crews including King Louis XV, Catherine the Great, and the philosopher Voltaire, who said he was a man who never dies and who apparently knew everything, has been tied to several local murders. In the 1970s, a French pseudo-celeb named Richard Chanfray publicly claimed to be the infamous Saint Germain, but then he died of a drug overdose in 1983. Kentucky, the witch girl of Pilot's Knob. Why it's creepy. Just looking at the pictures of young Mary Evelyn Ford's grave feels a bit unnerving, with a series of interlocking white crosses forming a fence around a pit of gravel, and the bars appearing unnaturally bent in some places. Then you hear the alleged backstory. A mother and daughter both accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake in 1916, with the mother's charring remains being carried to a far-off location while the daughter was buried in a steel-lined coffin covered in stone and encased in crosses to prevent her escape. Some have claimed to witness tiny footprints appearing in the gravel, or even a young ghostly figure trying to escape the gravesite. Kid ghosts, as we know, are the creepiest ghosts. Where it came from. While stories about the gravesite go back decades and naturally increased in detail with the growth of the internet, there's not much evidence that anyone was burned at the stake for witchcraft, in the area in 1916. Even back then, that was generally big news. Mary Evelyn Ford really did die a tragic young death, but the stated cause of death is peritonitis, an inflammation of the stomach lining. It's amazing what a truly unnerving gravesite can do for the imagination. We still wouldn't want to be near it at night, though. Kansas, Stahl's gateway to hell. Why it's creepy. The tiny town of Stahl has counted very few residents since it was founded in 1856. The most famous is rumored to be Lucifer himself, who some say appears at the town cemetery on Halloween and the spring equinox. They say he uses the site where a roofless church once stood as a portal to and from hell. Some say that he's drawn to the site of frequent witch hangings. Others believe one of the graves actually contains Satan's own child. Either way, new graves continue to be dug, despite signs warning against trespassers, perhaps referring directly to the Prince of Darkness himself or the cults that are rumored to flock to the grounds. Where it came from. The first published article about the horrors are traced back to a 1974 article in the University Daily Kansan. Though whispers about evil have persisted since 1900 or so, in 1998 the hanging tree was torn down to stop people from visiting. It hasn't lessened the need for the small town to bolster an annual police presence to deter visitors looking for a glimpse of the devil himself. Iowa, the Liska Axe Murder House. Why it's creepy. Axe Murder House, that says it all. Where it came from. The murders themselves is not an urban legend, they happened, and they still remain unsolved. Sometime between the evening of June 9th, 1912, and the morning that followed, 6 members of the Moore family and 2 house guests were brutally murdered, with each victim having suffered an axe wound to the head. One suspect was tried twice and never convicted, surprising no one. The somehow still standing house is the subject of numerous rumors, legends, and reports of paranormal activity. You can find out for yourself because you can actually go and stay there, just like the ghost hunter who mysteriously stabbed himself in the chest there in 2014. Indiana, Diana of the Dunes. Why it's creepy. Along the shores of Lake Michigan, fishermen, vacationers, and other passerbyers have reported sightings of Diana, a ghostly nude female apparition floating along the shoreline and eventually disappearing into the water without a trace. Where it came from. Fishermen first started reporting the sightings of a woman skinny dipping in the waters of Indiana's Lake Michigan's coastline in 1916. And that's because Alice Gray, the source of the Diana legend, was still very much alive at that point. The exact circumstances that caused her to live a reclusive life in a lakeside shack aren't entirely clear. But the years that followed saw her marry a man who later became a murder suspect and then died an early death, allegedly from uranic poisoning. Her ghostly presence has been a subject of local lore ever since. Illinois, the Italian Bride. Why it's creepy. An elaborate marble statue of a woman in a wedding dress is bound to stand out in a cemetery as it is. But that's not what's driven the Italian bride to be a subject of local fascination. Upon closer inspection, there is an actual photo flag on the gravesite of a woman in a casket, looking perfectly preserved, even though, as an inscription notes, the photo was taken 6 years later after burial, after the body was exhumed. Reports of unusual activity cover everything from the smell of fresh flowers near the gravesite in the dead of winter to the ghostly figure of a woman in white roaming the cemetery or the halls of nearby Proviso West High School in the dead of night. Where it came from. In 1921, recently married Julia Buccola Pita died in childbirth and was buried in her wedding dress. Legend has it her mother immediately began experiencing nightmares that Julia was demanding her grave be reopened. The source of the distress varies depending on the storyteller, often relating to some sort of discontent with Julia's new husband. But what isn't in dispute is that 6 years later, the mother got her wish, and Julia's pristine condition inspired her to raise funds for the statue that's been creeping out generations ever since. Idaho, the Phantom Jogger of Canyon Hill. Why it's creepy. There are rumors of many hauntings in Caldwell, Idaho's centuries-old Canyon Hill Cemetery, but the one that gets the most attention is the Midnight Jogger. As with many of the best urban legends, you have to do your part to get her attention. In this case, it involves parking between certain trees in the cemetery at night. And do it right, and the legless apparition will knock on your window to let you know she's there. Then continue on her route. It's creepy as heck, though now it's only the second worst image conjured when you think of sinister joggers. Where it came from. The origins are unknown, though considering there's another conspiritual legend that the entire state of Idaho doesn't actually exist. Perhaps the jogger is just a creation of a deranged and deceptive government. Hawaii, the Night Marchers. Why it's creepy. Picture yourself on a scenic Hawaiian beach at night. Imagine a full moon and a cool breeze running across the sand. Dreamy. But if you hear the faint sounds of drums pounding in the distance, or see a barrage of torches out on the horizon, it could be your worst nightmare. These spirits of ancient Hawaiian warriors dedicated to protecting the island from all outside threats will only spare your life if you reportedly lay face down, pee on yourself in submission, or if miraculously share a bloodline of one of the warriors. Good luck peeing on yourself, tourist. Where it came from. The first alleged encounter with the night marches. Known as Huakapo in Hawaiian, was recorded when Captain Cook arrived on Hawaiian shores in 1778. In Hawaiian tradition, the night marchers' role in life was to protect sacred members of the community. In modern times, their spirits have been reported all throughout the island, mainly at the sites of sacrificial temples and other sacred grounds. Missouri, Zombie Road. Why it's creepy. The dark canopied trail running through Wildwood, Missouri, just outside St. Louis, has been a hotbed of creepy tales for ages. often revolving around shadowy human figures, following and frightening those along the trail. Where it came from. Originally built as an access road for the gravel quarries along the Merrimack River, the road fell into disuse and despair in the 70s and saw an increase in teenagers flocking to the area to party and scare the crap out of each other. The origin stories of the trail's haunting varies widely, from the kind of plausible railway accidents, executed Civil War spies, to the more sensational, sadistic children's hospital. Several years ago, the pathway was paved so it might be used as a bike path, but that hasn't done much to slow the legend. The police are doing their best, however. Mississippi, the three-legged lady of Nash Road. Why it's creepy. Whenever a strange person starts chasing your car as you drive down a dark, unfamiliar road, it's unsettling. When she bangs on your hood, it's even worse. But when she has 3 legs and one seems to be rotting limb she's sewed to her body, that's just the worst. But that's what generations of Mississippians have said about the stretch of Nash Road near Columbus where the lady does her thing. Where it came from Robert Johnson selling his soul to the Yazoo Witch, many ghost stories in Mississippi persist. But the three-legged lady gets points for changing to suit what scares you. Some say that extra leg was removed from a dead lover and attached to her body. Some believe she's the ghost of a mother who got lost searching for her dismembered daughter. After all she could find was a severed leg. Some say she wants to race you across a nearby bridge. Either way, turn off your headlights on the stretch for the road and don't be surprised if you're forced to confront the specter yourself. Minnesota, the hairy man of Burgess Trail. Why it's creepy. What's not to be creeped out about? An 8-foot, musky-smelling, barefoot man with a reputation for being unnaturally aggressive is a heck of a thing to consider encountering in the woods. Some reported sightings were just that, sightings. However, reporters like Ken Zitzo made the hairy man more than an apparition, but something to fear. Zitzo returned from driving in the woods with dents all over his car hood and said the hairy man jumped onto the road and began pounding the hood. Where it came from, nobody really knows. Sightings trace back to the 60s and had a significant increase in the 70s and still happens from time to time. Some say it's a legend. Some say there was an old hermit living in the woods who wasn't too keen on your rascally kids wandering his land. Others say the hairy man is real and point to a mysterious skull discovered in the Burgess Trail area that is human-like but not hominid. It was discovered by a private citizen who didn't turn it over, so no one knows if it's human, Bigfoot, an animal, or just a hoax. Michigan, Hell's Bridge. Why it's creepy. The Nine Rouge and Dog Men, they've got nothing on the tail of Elias Frisk, a deranged old preacher who, according to Blood, curdily lure Petapipper, a group of tethered children, into the woods near what is now Algoma Township. He slaughtered them one by one, casting them into Cedar Creek before being caught by their parents and hanged, but not before, saying he was possessed by demons. In its current form, Hell's Bridge is a creaky, narrow metal footbridge in the middle of the woods, where those brave enough to cross at night claim to hear the voices and screams of children, and are sometimes greeted by a black figure with glowing eyes as they traverse it. Where it came from, there is no record of an Eliza Frisk in the area, though there was a prominent Frisk family beginning in the 1910s. Still, despite the lack of hard facts, anyone who visited the bridge will attest that there's something out there, and it usually makes its presence known as you're tethering on a shaky metal bridge in the moonlight. Massachusetts, the curse of Gall's Quarry. Why it's creepy. The Salem witch trials were creepy enough to begin with. Go read The Crucible again if you don't believe it. But the story of Gall's Quarry, who was slowly pressed to death under a series of progressively heavier rocks in an effort to extract a confession, is particularly unsettling. Where it came from. Legend has it he uttered a curse against Salem right before his dying breath. You could understand why he had some ill will. For generations, his apparition has allegedly appeared in the cemetery before something terrible is about to happen, including a 1914 fire that burned down a sizable proportion of the city. Please like and subscribe for part 2. All of this is research found on the internet.